I'm Lynda Wright. Today is April 10th, 2008, and this is Macon Memories, an oral history project at Randolph-Macon College. Today I'm here with Professor Pat Dementi and Professor Elsa Falls.
I'm Pat Dementi. I came to Randolph-Macon in 1975 to the biology department, and I was here until I retired in 2004.
I'm Elsa Falls. I also am was in the biology department and actually still am, at least part-time. I came to Randolph-Macon in 1978 and retired same time Pat did, 2004. I stayed out 1 year and have been back on a part-time basis since then, teaching some of my favorite courses. So Pat and I actually have a lot in common, and we'll try to bring that out, our commonality, if that's a good word, as we go through the interview. But Pat, I want to start by, since you were here earlier than I, to ask you how you came to be at Randolph-Macon.
It was just sort of a bolt out of the blue. My husband was in graduate school. I had kept children for 2 years and decided we really need a little bit more money than this, and so I sort of put the word out that I was looking, and Wallace Martin from the biology department called and said, "We're looking for somebody to teach anatomy. Would you be interested?" I said, "Sure." So I came up and interviewed and met Howard Davis, who was the dean at the time, and they offered me the job, and 28 years later I was still here.
Well, actually, the person who first called me was actually Pat. I had finished my master's degree at the University of Richmond in biology in 1972 and had been teaching as an adjunct either at the University of Richmond or J. Sargent Reynolds since 1972. And trying to combine raising a family with teaching is essentially what I was doing. So I got this call from Pat Dementi that indicated that they were looking for somebody to teach invertebrate zoology. So I thought, well, why not? And the funny thing was, when I came up to Randolph-Macon to meet Wallace Martin, who was chair of the biology department at that point in time, I couldn't find the college. So I stopped on Route 54 and asked somebody, "Where's Randolph-Macon College?" And they looked at me like I had lost my mind, and so I was able to find it. And I remember that first day I met Wallace, and then he introduced me. The other person I met that day was Bruce King, who was at Randolph-Macon.
Bruce came the same year that I did.
Okay. And let's see, who else was here? Is there anybody else that was here?
Mac McClurkin was here.
Right.
That may be all.
Yeah, because Art Conway and Barry Knisley came a couple years after I came, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the next two that were added to the department.
And then Roche.
Right.
And there were some short-term people in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I'll say one thing.
Yeah.
I remember before I came up here, I had my husband drive me up so that I would know where the college was. So I didn't have the problem that you did.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Did you start part-time or did you start as a full-time?
No, I started full-time.
Okay.
Actually, they said you can go part-time or full-time, and I said, well, it's not to my advantage unless I go full-time. So they said, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very informal.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all like it has gotten to be with national searches and so forth. And I think for a long time, even after I came, people were added in the same way. Just call up and say, would you be interested? Come on up.
Well, yeah, and actually when I started it was part-time, and once I was here, they needed someone in the general biology labs.
Right.
And I started coordinating those and teaching some of the labs, and then at some point in time, and I don't know how long after I came, the issue came up of should we be tenure track?
Mm-hmm.
Should they be tenure track positions, since we don't have, neither of us has a terminal degree. I always like that terminology, terminal degree. So as I recall, and maybe, Pat, I've got this a little confused, the Board of Trustees had to vote.
They did, but it was a while after we were here. I don't remember how long.
I was going to say maybe 1980 or 1982 when we...
Whatever year we got tenure,
Yeah.
I think was right before then, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Well, somewhat contentious, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know it was after one of the accreditations. The issue was raised during that, and that's when they addressed it.
Okay.
So I don't remember the year, but that's what prompted it.
So Pat and I were probably the last people, certainly in certain academic areas, that were able to become tenure track without that terminal degree.
Right.
You know, I think it's still possible. For example, in our librarians, our faculty, which we're very proud of. I having been on the committee on the faculty when we had that long discussion with Robert Holyer as dean, whether librarians should be faculty members or not. But librarians, of course, have other degrees besides just PhDs, and then I guess maybe in the arts it might be possible, and maybe in music.
Or if you're just a visiting instructor,
Right.
maybe on your way to getting your degree now. But,
Right. So
yeah.
that has certainly changed. Let's see. Do you want to talk about who your role models and mentors were in your early years of teaching?
I'm not sure I had role models, but I think certainly there were some people when I came who were venerated as excellent professors. Now, Schuyler Miller was the prototype. Everybody talked about Schuyler Miller. I never got a chance to hear him give a lecture. I wish I had. George Oliver was another one, and I think George sort of took Elsa and I both under his wing and sort of pushed us along, nurtured us. So he was, in essence, a mentor, I guess. Howard Davis, who, as I said, was dean when I came, but he was just interim, acting dean. And he was another one that I know the students really were very, very fond of. He won the Thomas Branch Award many times. Never heard him talk either, which I wish I had.
Yeah.
But those were the big names when I came.
Yeah.
How about
Okay.
you? Any others?
Well, I would say, first of all, being in the sciences always, I never had the feeling of being the first woman in a particular position because I was used to working with all males. I mean, when you go back to, both Pat and I graduated from, well, when we graduated, we called it West Hampton College of the University of Richmond. Now, they claim there's a West Hampton College, but I don't know whether there is or not. I think it's kind of gone by the board. But all the professors that both of us had were males at University of Richmond. And actually, if I had to point to mentors, I would have to go back to Nolan Rice, who was my thesis advisor at University of Richmond. He used to let me bring my children over with me because they were little at that time when I was working on a master's, and they could come.
Well, you know, I had Tom Harris at the University of Richmond, and I think he probably was responsible for my being at Randolph-Macon because I think he was the one that passed my name on to Wallace.
And Tom was at MCV.
He was at MCV when
at
I
that
was there,
time.
too.
Yeah. So I would say Nolan Rice, I agree with George Oliver 100%. He always would say, now, you and Pat are kind of like my daughters, and I'm going to stick up for you and see that you're treated right. And then I can't say enough good things about Wallace Martin as chair of the department, who kind of kept a loose rein, I would say, in the department. And he would always say, now, Elsa, if that's what you think you ought to do, then you just go ahead and do it. So he was fantastic.
And I think he was highly respected on campus, too, as a sort of a mediator and a leader. It was not just in our department.
And then I would point to, in my case, Jim Martin, who was the chair of the biology department at J. Sargent Reynolds when I was there, who was actually a graduate of University of Richmond.
Oh, is he?
Yes, he is. And he's still at J. Sargent Reynolds.
He's a member of our church. I didn't know he went to the University of Richmond.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know
Interesting.
his wife, Lisa, though
Yes.
they're both very active in the Virginia Academy of
Right,
Science.
right.
And I know you're the ones that had your gutters stolen then.
Yes. Just as from the church.
The
They stole the
church.
gutters from the church.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you want to talk about what was easy and fun about teaching at Randolph-Macon, or particular challenges?
Well, I think the fun part was the students themselves. We've had some great students go through the department. I think there was a time, like in the mid to late 80s, when the department really gelled well.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some excellent students go from there who've gone on to do college teaching. Of course, a lot went to be doctors.
Neil Norton.
Neil Norton.
Let's
yes.
mention Neil.
He was probably the best all-around student that I ever taught. Was a natural-born teacher, is a teacher now, is a college teacher. And just would go out of his way. He would come in evenings to help the students in comparative anatomy. He had had it the year before. He would come in and help them get ready for their practicals. He would spend hours teaching the other students and helping them. He was just a great guy.
And is he in Oklahoma? Is that right? At a dental school?
He's at a dental school.
And he's professor
And has-
of anatomy, isn't he?
Yes, he has been selected as Teacher of the Year, too. So, I mean, he
Yeah.
fulfilled his promise.
So he comes to mind. The other one that I can think of right off is Paul Nyantaki,
Yes.
who was a student from Ghana who came and was just such an excellent student and just loved to learn for the sake of learning. And did you you should have gotten an email from Barclay just in the last couple weeks
No.
from Paul. Well, she sent his email because he was interested in hearing from you and from me and some of the other people that he had contact with when he was here on campus. He's back in Ghana, actually.
Yeah, he really is a fine person. He was an older student.
Mm-hmm.
He struggled with anatomy only because of the language barrier. He said he would have to think of things in his own language and then translate them, and that was difficult with all the terminology in anatomy. But he did make Phi Beta Kappa, and I remember he had no appreciation for what it was, and I think he was just going to let it slide. And Art Conway pulled him aside and said, "Look, you want to be a part of this," and he actually convinced him to be initiated, which I thought was a wonderful thing on Art's part.
I remember Paul drove a cab
Yes.
in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
for
on weekends.
weekends because of he obviously
To make
needed
money.
some money.
Mm-hmm.
And
He went. Excuse me.
go ahead.
He went on to Johns Hopkins, and he tried to drive a cab when he was there, but then I think it got to a point where his time commitments to his education were such that he couldn't do it anymore. But
And,
he did finish.
That brings up Art Conway, who we both had the pleasure of teaching with over the years, and who he's just a fantastic human being. He really is. And if there were problems with technology or couldn't find something in the department, Art was always the one we went to, and he's always willing to go the second and third mile.
Oh,
So
yes. And he could jerry-rig anything.
he is fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that I had the opportunity to meet Art and to work with him.
And the students, he took a real personal interest in all the students, I guess.
Yeah, I know there was a rumor that maybe he lived in Copley somewhere because he was always here day and night.
He never went home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What about challenges in your teaching? Did you?
Well, what I would say is when you're at a small liberal arts college like Randolph-Macon, my experience was you ended up teaching a lot of courses that you probably didn't have a great background in, so there was lots of learning going on. And I'm thinking about marine biology, which I ended up teaching because I had started in invertebrate. I had the honor to take classes to Jamaica for the field component of the course. The other one was I remember at one time we needed somebody to teach genetics since we changed the requirements and all biology majors had to take genetics. And so I volunteered to teach genetics, which was really kind of not very, I didn't think that one through because genetics has changed, so it's all molecular. And so I spent a lot of time, excuse me, at workshops trying to come up to date in genetics. So I would say things like genetics and marine biology. And then I taught at one time at Randolph-Macon we had a course which was called The Social and Ethical Impact of Computers on Society.
I remember that.
And I ended up teaching in that program too.
This was when we had a computer literacy requirement.
Right.
All the students had to go through, was it about a year, 2 semesters of computer literacy?
Yeah.
Now they're so computer literate, you don't even think about that.
No, I turned to them for help,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. I remember when I first came, and probably when you were here, they had a January term, and it was supposed to be something that was entirely different from what you usually taught. I came here to teach comparative anatomy and human anatomy. And they asked me what did I want to teach, and I'm thinking, gee, I don't know. How about nutrition? I probably know something about nutrition since I teach human anatomy and physiology. Little did I know how little I knew about nutrition. That first year was frantic. Of course, it was a 4-week course. And every night I was cramming in, 50, 60, 100 pages and trying to get ready to talk about it the next day. It just about did me in. That was a challenge. It was a real challenge. But I think the students really appreciated that course. And I know I had some of them say, oh, we have changed our way of eating since we took that course, which I felt good about. But then they went to non-majors lab requirements, and they asked me to teach my nutrition with a lab attached. And that was difficult, and it also changed the complexion of the course so that I don't think students enjoyed it anymore at all. It was a shame, really. And finally I got to the point where I said, I can't teach this way anymore. So I just gave it up.
That brings to mind, you're talking about the nutrition course. People have always confused Pat and I because of, we're both women, we both came from West Hampton College, we're both involved in Phi Beta Kappa, all these issues.
Our offices are right next door to each other.
Right. And so they would ask me, people would ask me, well, now, you know about nutrition. What about vitamin B or whatever? And I would say, no, I don't know anything about nutrition. That's Pat. You'll have to ask her. So that was kind of interesting. Let's see. How about your favorite courses to teach? What would you say about that?
Strangely enough, it was comparative anatomy. That's considered one of the most difficult courses that you can take. When I first came, I was sort of like Elsa. They asked me to teach it, and I had it. I don't know how many years before. I don't want to say, maybe.
Dr. West or Woolcott?
I had Dr. West.
Okay, I did too.
And so I said, yeah, I can do that. Well, that was enough.
Yeah, that's... Let's see. Do you want to? We've kind of talked about the changes in the student body. Do you want to talk about interactions with students outside the classroom, Pat?
Sure. I guess it was in my younger days. Maybe I was more on the same level as the students, or certainly when my children were the same age as they, I could relate to them better. And
Right.
I can remember a period of time when I would have students in my office every afternoon talking about everything from classwork to their love life. And I enjoyed it, although I couldn't get anything done, obviously. As I got older, that stopped. Now, I don't know whether it's because I got older or whether the students changed. But they were encouraging interactions with students, and I know I tried several attempts, for example, to have students come to my house for dinner. I did have my nutrition class come several times to sort of model, the kind of meal that they were supposed to be eating. That was fun. I invited my advisees one year, and one came, and I said, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Well, I had kind of the same expectations and the same results. I remember one year I invited members of a class. I even came up here and picked them up, which is, it takes me about 35 minutes to get to Randolph-Macon from where I live. And there were 2 or 3 students who came. So in the early years, I remember we used to have, you remember beta meetings that, or the cookouts that normally took place at some faculty members' house, and the students, really came out for
They
those.
would support that.
Right.
And Chi Beta Phi, which was the honorary science fraternity founded here at Randolph-Macon, they used to auction, to raise money, they would auction off dinners at faculty homes. And that was well supported. I had them come to my house a couple of times for that. But I don't think there's that much interaction of that nature, and I don't know. I mean, certainly from my perspective, there isn't.
I think you're right. Most of my interactions these days are taking students on field trips, that kind of thing. The first year experience course that I'm involved in, we just took our students to Washington, D.C., to the Museum of Natural History and the Museum of the American Indian and those kinds of things. And then I guess my most memorable experiences, those kinds of events, would be the trips to Jamaica, where I always felt fortunate if I got everybody back in one piece. And those were exciting times, for sure. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. A couple of years in my comparative anatomy class, and usually those classes, they got to be small. When I first came, I think I had 17, which was a large number.
Oh, wow.
My understanding was that everybody had put off taking it because they didn't like the teacher that was teaching it, and so they were waiting for the new teacher, hoping that I would be easier. And one of my first students told me, he said, no, he said, you have definite McClurkian tendencies.
You were never considered to be easy. That's
no,
for
I
sure.
know that.
I don't think I was either. So we have that in common also, I guess, essentially.
But when my classes were small, I did take several of them up to the Museum of Natural History, and they took us behind the scenes and showed us, their bone collections and things like that. That was very interesting. It's very interesting. One year I had a comparative anatomy class that had only 2 students.
Oh, wow.
And you need a critical mass for something like that, and that one didn't really gel. But if you could have 8 to 10, you could do well. And I remember one year, one class, I will never forget it. I think Neil Norton was in it. It just came together incredibly well, and everybody helped each other. I rarely had to go around and show them any kind of thing in the, when they were dissecting, because they did it themselves, and Neil probably had something to do with that, I suspect. but they helped each other. And then in later years, it got to the point where I had to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they didn't seem to care. They didn't care about technique. They performed poorly on practicals.
Mm-hmm.
It just entirely different character.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I had an invertebrate class, I think maybe the last time I taught it, it had 3 students in it. So
It doesn't work
it's just
well.
not enough. And then if one person's absent,
Yeah.
you know, and then if 2 people are absent, you wonder, well, do I do this? And suppose nobody shows up, do I just go ahead and do whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to catch up. So, yeah, you do need, you're right, a critical mass.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3.
No. And another of my comparative anatomy classes, I don't think it was the same one I've been talking about, but I had a very goodly number of excellent students in it. And I walked in one day, and they had taken a cat. We dissected cats. They had taken a cat and put a cape on it and hung it from the ceiling. And they said this was Super Cat. I mean, you know. Actually, later they gave me flowers because they said they thought they'd gone a little too far. But I don't think any of the students that are here now would do something like that.
No, I remember several of my invertebrate zoology classes would save the parts from some of the things they dissected. And several years they made me earrings out of, you know, crab claws or a crab claw necklace or that kind of thing. So that was always a treat when you go in and suddenly there's this little gift for you. Yeah. Actually, I think I still have one of my crab claw necklaces in my jewelry case at home. I think I need to clean it out, probably.
Yeah. I think it was the same class that floated the cat who wrote a song about the cats, and they sang it. Somebody brought a guitar and they sang it to me one day when I came into class. And I know I saved the words. I think they had written the words up on the board, and I saved those for years because I thought it was a sort of cute thing. You know?
Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, should we talk about the changes in technology? Let's talk about that.
Boy, things are ever different. I think I was telling Lynda when we first started discussing this. I can remember when I first came. First of all, there were no Xerox machines, and now we can't live without Xerox machines.
That's right.
We had mimeograph machines.
Mm-hmm. And stencils?
And stencils, those nasty, awful, messy stencils. And you'd be in there trying to run off your test before class, and it would jam up, and it was just awful.
It's horrible.
And of course, we didn't have secretarial help. We had to either handwrite or type all of our own tests. And I was a terrible typist, so I hand wrote a lot of those. And then, of course, the advent of Xerox machines. I don't know how we lived without them.
I don't either.
But
or computers.
Computers, yeah. Well, another big change, though, which seems minor, I guess, was the telephone system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about when you came, but when I came, we had a switchboard, which closed at 5 o'clock, and you could not make a call out or get a call in after that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had faculty meetings at night. I had small children at home. I would like to, call and touch base, or since I was driving by myself to Richmond from here, I would call my husband and say, I'm leaving now. Mm-hmm. Expect me in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And he used to say, if you don't get home in that time, I'm going to come up Route 1 and find you. It made me feel better.
Yeah.
But I couldn't call.
Right. Yeah.
So, and now the telephone system is so sophisticated, phone mail and et cetera, et cetera.
And almost nobody these days uses the phone, I've found. I very seldom get a call on my phone here at the college. It's all email, or obviously all the students and us to some degree all have our little cell phones, and I use those. But the the decline in the use of the telephone and also the decline in mail has been interesting. I only go to Peel Hall these days maybe once a week because everything comes as an email attachment. So that has really changed. And the LCD projectors and the PowerPoint in the classrooms and the
well, of course, I was in the days of the overhead opaque projectors.
Oh yeah, yes.
And it's extremely different. I remember too when they first started talking about email. I didn't know what email was, and they said, "Well, we're going to have a class and teach you how to use email." And I thought, electronic mail? I don't care about that. I didn't go. And now, what do you do without it?
Well, do you remember when the college subsidized the professors purchasing computers for their houses, and we had the choice between an IBM and a K-Pro. And I chose K-Pro because it was cheaper.
I did too. We had to pay half. College paid half. We had to pay half.
That very quickly became a dinosaur.
Extremely quickly. My worst memory of the K-Pro is you typed everything in, and then you what's the word? You formatted it.
Oh, formatted. Okay.
And so it was not till you finished putting everything in that you knew how many pages you had or where everything was going to fall on a page. And at that particular time, I was working up a lab manual that had pictures and so forth that went with it, or diagrams. And so I would type in, and then I'd print it out, and I'd try to leave places for the diagrams, and inevitably, when they formatted, it would come out with the diagram split between two pages. And then I'd have to go back in and try to respace and reformat, and I thought I was going to lose my mind. I did this on a summer grant.
Was that when you did the thing? Was that on organic molecules? That I remember actually that manual that you all put together with organic molecules. I think, did we use it in?
We used it several years in intro biology.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I remember that.
Until the students complained bitterly because it got too tedious.
Yeah.
I still think it had value, but anyway, that's a personal prejudice.
I would agree with that.
But I will remember when Wallace Martin said, "Oh, well, you should have an IBM because it formats every page independently." I thought, why have I been working with this K-Pro? Oh.
And now I had Dean Hindman arrived at my office this morning to tell me they were coming by to put Vista on my computer. And so here we go. Steep learning curve once again. It's ever-changing and ever-changing very quickly. The technology is just unbelievable in all areas.
Well, of course, the classrooms, too, that are so computerized now. And, I mean, this is good. I mean, these are really nice state-of-the-art things.
When they work. Which they don't always work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can remember, when we showed projection films, and they
you had
worked.
to thread the projector. I had forgotten about that. Oh, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. All right, Pat, anything else you're just dying to say?
Well, they did ask about changes in administration.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the big things that started since, I don't know how long after I came, was evaluations, which has been a bone of contention probably ever since.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And relying so heavily on the student evaluations.
Right.
Yeah. That's still a big bone of contention, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I think it's probably with us forever, do you think?
Yeah. I think so. And it's remarkable how things change when you get a new dean, and they all do things differently. And Jerry Garris, I think, was, I always thought he was probably, well, let's see, Hendricks was is an excellent dean also, and then I would say Jerry Garris. But somebody new comes on campus and all the rules change, so you have to be adjusting constantly. Somehow the presidents never affected us to any great extent, I don't think. Now, when was Earl Moreland, he was still around on campus.
He was on campus, yes.
But he had retired
Right.
before either of us came.
Right.
And then, I guess, Liddell Payne.
Yeah, well, Luther White was the president when I came. He was not popular with the faculty at all.
No.
And I think, yes, Liddell Payne was well received. I think another issue that has bounced around a lot is teaching load. I'm not sure where they stand on that now, but I know when I came, the science faculty were always complaining because they had to teach more hours because they would only count labs half.
Right.
And we always felt like labs took as much time, even in prep, as the lecture part, particularly after you got your lectures a little bit under your belt. You know, the first year or two, those lectures are pretty difficult. I know that they changed the teaching load, and that went with abolishing the May term, did it not?
Right. The teaching load, it seems to me, has continued to be lessened all through the years that I've been here. But also the responsibilities and expectations for what you're supposed to do other than teach, I think, have increased.
Yes.
The emphasis on research has definitely increased, I would say. And, of course, then the committee work, which has, I guess, always been with us. And the expectations are there, too, for the committee work. But up on the research expectations and down on teaching loads, I would say, have been the two main trends.
And I think down on the emphasis on effective teaching.
Yes.
With that.
Yes. And after all, this is primarily a teaching college, isn't
Well, this is what they always told me when I came. The most important thing is the classroom experience. And I feel like that's important now, but I think there's all these other things that are sort of detracting from that.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is kind of why I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, because all I do is teach. And working with a full-time colleague who is in the math department for the first year experience that I'm doing now, Bruce Torrance, I have so much more time to devote to the class than he does, because he's got all these other things that he has to do. As chair of the department, for example, and he's teaching 3 or 4 classes. I'm teaching 1, so I tell you, the pressure on full-time folks out here is really high, I think.
Yeah. It had reached a point before I retired where I felt like all I did was extracurricular stuff. I mean, I barely had time to think about what I was going to do before I went into the classroom.
That's right, yeah.
Did you want to talk about your involvement with Phi Beta Kappa?
Sure.
Just before we end.
Absolutely, okay.
Well, of course, Elsa and I were both Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Richmond, which meant that we were eligible to be in the Phi Beta Kappa chapter here. I do know that when I first came, I didn't realize they had a Phi Beta Kappa chapter. It's my understanding that they used to try to identify faculty members who came here as Phi Beta Kappa so that they could ask them to participate, but somehow they missed me. And so I'd been here several years before an announcement was made at faculty meeting that we're going to have a meeting of the Phi Beta Kappa faculty after this to talk about so-and-so. And I remember going up to George Oliver and saying, would I be included in that? He said, oh, yes. So that's when I started becoming active. And dear George made sure that I was asked to be an officer. I was the vice president and the president. And then when he retired, he conned me into being the secretary-treasurer of the chapter, which is an ongoing position. He said, oh, it doesn't take much time. In short, he was not truthful. It turned out to be very time consuming. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed, tracking the students and so forth.
And you're still involved with Phi Beta Kappa
well,
in the Richmond area,
the
right?
Richmond Area Association,
Yeah.
But I think two things that happened while I was a member of Phi Beta Kappa. I think one was instituting the sophomore awards to identify or to recognize students who were sort of on track to be Phi Beta Kappa. I think this was a good thing. The other thing was our fortunate endowment by John Werner, who was an alum and a Phi Beta Kappa member. Money that we can use either to pay for students who cannot afford to join. They are using the money to pay for their dinners for initiation, which I think is a nice gesture. And now they have started paying for the sophomore award winners' dinners at the fall meeting. Our chapter is extremely fortunate because in all of the conventions that I've been to, this is one of the big problems, is funding things that are going on in the chapters, and we have this very nice endowment, and I think we really are very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah, actually they now pay for faculty members to come to when there's a dinner associated with a meeting. They actually pay.
And yet I don't think there's a good attendance.
No, there really isn't.
I don't know what it is. Again, in the earlier years, maybe it's because of all these other demands on your time that people feel like they can't do this extra thing. But I think there used to be much better support from the faculty for things that Phi Beta Kappa did than there is now.
But I do think, looking at our chapter versus chapters at other colleges and universities nationally, that Phi Beta Kappa is still well respected here. And as far as I know, there's never been a student who's been invited to become a member. One student, Pat says, who turned.
This was a foreign student, and I think they don't appreciate Phi Beta Kappa as much as people from this country.
Yeah. But I do know that other institutions have a big problem with people have never heard of Phi Beta Kappa, and they're not going to pay the initiation fee or take the time to come to the initiation.
Right. I think this is
service.
One good thing about the sophomore award winners is that they are at an earlier time are made aware of Phi Beta Kappa.
Yeah. Well, Pat, how long were you secretary treasurer?
I think it was 13 years.
13 years.
I think George was 15. So
Yeah.
I told him when I took over, I said, I'm not going to be able to stay as long as you.
But that position, which is, as Pat said, an ongoing position, that's who really runs the chapter.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. I think we're through.
Well, thank you very much, Elsa Falls and Pat Dementi, for making memories here with us today. Thank you.